Kinglsey. She's co-founder of Us For Them, that's a parents' organisation which was basically set up to get kids back to schools during the pandemic. Good morning to you, Molly.
Good morning, Gillian.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Look, just getting kids back to school this year is turning out to be a problem, isn't it? With some schools, and again, we have to accept, it is a tiny minority of schools, they believe, have got this problem with this RAAC, possibly crumbling concrete. And it's been identified that actually in most schools, it's a building rather than the whole school. But there is no doubt there's been a crisis in terms of, some of the schools, we don't even know whether they've got it or not. They've not returned their surveys. And this all happening a couple of days before kids return to school, yesterday, today and tomorrow. What do you make of the whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's the optics, isn't it? The optics are awful again, because as you say, this is the first year in four years that actually kids should have had an uninterrupted start to term. And yeah, it is a small minority, but it's 156 schools potentially, and there's a degree of ambiguity still about how many schools, about which schools, about how long kids will be out of the classroom. And I think we can all agree that is really, really suboptimal for those kids.
Suboptimal, that's such a wonderful politician's word. or as Ms Keegan might call it, effing suboptimal.
Well, it is effing suboptimal, Julia. And actually, the message it sends is just really dire. So, the reality is that this is a result of many successive governments. It's not as simple as saying it's the fault of this Conservative government. Of course it is. And I do have a degree of sympathy with what Keegan was trying to say yesterday, that actually, they are dealing with this. They are taking it seriously. So, that is fine. Yeah. They are. However, it is a result of chronic and long-standing underinvestment and actually lack of care and regard for children's schooling. So on the one hand, you've got the fact that the school system has been underinvested in. I mean, I think that is accepted by pretty much every key education stakeholder now. Yeah. People like Rob Halfon, obviously Conservative chair of the Education Select Committee, he has been saying in the Education Select Committee have been saying for years that there needs to be a long-term and, really importantly, secure funding plan for schools and education. And what I mean by that is ring-fence, so a protected pot of money for exactly this kind of thing. And that has happened. And really, this is, coming home to roost.
Yeah, now. I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? But we have an issue in this country where you look at China, not that I think we should be emulating China on virtually anything, but they do have, not even 5-year plans. They have 20-year, 40-year, generational plans. We don't even do things on a 5-year basis. Everything is done on a crisis basis. We've seen the front page of the Times today, and I think this is a very legitimate criticism. This is Gareth Davies, head of the National Audit Office. This is the government spending watchdog, saying the government is basically using a sticking plaster approach to essential maintenance, and basically suggests the government has ended up wasting money on emergency repairs because it's neglected the unflashy job of keeping buildings in usable condition. And every homeowner will know that, won't they? That you do need to just keep the upkeep, check the roof, do the drains, all of the boring. Oh, actually, I don't know. There's a bit repointing needed, or the drains need doing something. And actually, it's very expensive. It's not flashy. Everything looks pretty much exactly the same at the end of it. You spent that tens of thousands of pounds, but it's what's necessary to keep these buildings in decent fabric. But we don't want to pay for it.
No, and I think that's right. And you do that on a sunny day, and they haven't done it on a sunny day. They've waited until there's a thunderstorm.
Have we had any sunny days since 2008? That's the question. Have we had any sunny days? I don't think we have.
No, we haven't. And actually, if you look at overall funding, and I am not a fan of big state. I think there's many, many ways in which the size and reach of the state should be decreased. I don't think education is one of them. I think if you're going to have a state school system, and I think there is probably a separate question on whether we have the right model, but that is a different can of worms. If you're going to accept the premise that you have a state school system with 22,000 odd schools, you have to maintain them and you have to look after them. And, let's remember, Julia, these are not only places of education. Schools are where children spend the majority of their conscious hours. It would be a really great aspiration for those buildings to not only not be falling down and physically a danger to children, but, wonderful, nice, lovely places people might want to be. Their lives.
No, indeed. Well, Nick Gibb, the schools minister, this morning he said we're taking a more proactive action on that on this issue than any other government in the world. I mean, We are the government that put out the warning notice in 2018. We're the government that sent questionnaires to every responsible body asking them to tell us about RAAC in their schools. Of course, didn't get responses from a lot of them. Is that good enough?
No, I mean, this is also the government whose pretty much first action in office was to scrap there was a Building Schools for the Future programme, which was a very ambitious, arguably perhaps too ambitious, but a very ambitious programme, which was crafted over a long number of years by the previous government. Michael Gove's first action pretty much when he came into power in the coalition government in 2010 was to scrap that programme. And really, we've been on the back foot ever since. So just 2021, before any of the news of the concrete issue really hit press, the DfE was already saying there was a maintenance backlog, just a backlog of £11.4 billion. So that gives you an idea for the scale of the issue. And of course, don't forget, this is the same government who appointed an education recovery SAR after, on the height of the pandemic. Remember that? You know, don't worry, everyone, it will all be okay. We're going to catch up all the kids. That the education SAR, Sir Kevin Collins, said that the sum needed to adequately catch up children was 14 billion, and the government refused that, and they in the end funded 3 or 4, and you know, as we know, that in itself has been relatively chaotic. So I think to claim that this is a government that has championed education is just gaslighting. They haven't. They've been absolutely awful. And I will be amazed if there is a parent in the country who has not been alienated by this point.
Absolutely.